and relate to him. 2, because he makes jokes, he plays the Joker card. And remember, the court jester could say anything he wanted without being held responsible, because he's a court jester. Like a child, you don't hold a child responsible a lot of the time.
Well, I mean, I've written I've written a sort of a worksheet or a cheat sheet in some ways, and I looked at probably the most likeable characteristics that people actually can have, and there's some were missing, and some are probably not in his case, if you actually want to look at the overall package. Now there are many likability factors overall, but in his case what made him likeable is that he's actually quite assertive, in terms of we like assertion. It shows leadership and things like this. So when he says we're going to get breakfast done by this date, no, it's not going to happen. We're going to call a general election. For him, calling a general election was a risk. We didn't know whether he was actually going to win or not, or he was going to be that unpopular, and calling it in December and things like this. It was a risk in terms of doing that, and but it showed that it shows a level of assertion. He also shows humour and things like this. One of the other characteristics I included in that report was empathy. Now, you wouldn't call him the most empathetic person, but if you actually heard his speech this morning, he actually talked in a more empathetic tone in terms of, you voted for me even though probably some of you are lifelong Labour supporters, and I'm going to do everything in my power. I'm going to work night and day to make sure I deliver for you. So there's elements of those likability characteristics that he's actually bringing into the into the equation to make him a more likable overall picture.
Mind you, that was probably written for him, but I do take your point.
Well, whether it is or not, when you actually look at someone, how do you make someone marketable, and what part of marketability is likability, and you actually have to break those things down into those stages, and what makes someone likable and what's going to make people more responsible.
But also, you see, as you say, structure and leadership. But it's got to be done in the right direction. In other words, you can't be forcing it down people's throats. It's got to be. It's got to be seen to follow what the people want.
And this is what Jo Swinson in effect attempted to do. She was forcing it down people's throats, and she wasn't doing it in a calm way. She was doing it in almost in an erratic,
shrill, argumentative way.
Yeah, it was. I'm not sure whether Boris Johnson, because I didn't see any articles relating to it, but he didn't see him hugely criticise many of the members of the other parties
at all.
Whereas Jo Swinson was calling him dangerous and. But she was actually quite derogatory in terms of that, which is not a level of behaviour.
In fact, Boris Johnson even managed to avoid getting in trouble in that in the what was it, the NATO summit, where Justin Trudeau and a couple of others were found making stupid comments about Donald Trump.
Well, actually, I watched that. I watched that clip. He didn't really engage in the conversation. In fact, I'll probably even sure from a body language point of view, there was a point when Justin Trudeau made the comment, and he actually immediately reverted to his glass and took a drink out of it, which is almost a level of actually, I'm keeping my mouth shut.
Yeah, he knew he had to be on his best behaviour. Then there's no doubt about
because
it.
The thing is, he's got to learn to work with Donald Trump. There's trade deals on the table, although if he puts the NHS on the table, he's going to do himself severely.
He's going to get a lot of trouble, isn't he?
Much more damage.
But you see,
although I don't think that would be on the table.
This is the standard of leaders. Justin Trudeau thinks it's okay to say something like that. Then I don't know if you spotted it. I'm not sure it was Michel Barnier or no, it was Donald Tusk. There is a photograph of Donald Tusk making a gun sign with his index finger and thumb against the back of Donald Trump and thinking he was clever doing it. And you think, what are these guys on?
And
They
you
are
wa- and-
completely
and-
out of
and-
touch.
And you wonder why they're not going to get he's not going to play ball with them in a trade deal. You also got to learn to play nice with others. And the same goes for Donald Trump. He's got to learn to play nice with others as well. But there's a level of what he's doing for his country. And I think that's very much a clear message that the Tories are looking to do. I mean, it's almost like he's almost gone very nationalistic in terms of the message that he's putting out there now.
Mm-hmm.
This one country, one nation type thing. So, and the thing is, because we are coming out of Europe, so we are going to be literally one nation in that respect.
Yes. So with Boris,
Although saying that, sorry, I interrupted. Saying that, I don't know if you actually saw when he actually made his final speech before he went back. There was a slogan which was the people's government, and I think it was Andrew Marr or someone along those lines who actually said, well, actually, it sounds almost very Russian or very things like this. I wasn't sure that was the best slogan to come up with, actually.
Oh, fair enough. So we talked about likability and humour in terms of appearing like a slight joker, which makes you Teflon and less likely be held responsible. And the third component is that Boris was very skillful in negotiating the fact that he was aware, at least, of how shall we put it, political correctness and racial issues, because he knows, and this is the genius, when the reason why people voted Brexit is because they were beginning to feel threatened because of a deluge of people who weren't English. In fact, the demography has changed. If you sat early in the morning on a tube train 20 years ago, it would be full of coloured people of colour. Now it's full of Eastern Europeans. And a lot of these people are much less agreeable too. Just part of their culture, I guess. And when people feel threatened, they become authoritarian from the bottom up. They seek leaders who are authoritarian. And you're seeing this all the way around the world with the rise of the far right, even people being elected, so for instance in Austria. And what you're also seeing is a lack of acceptance of difference, and that's exactly what's happening all the way around the world. People are stepping forwards and saying this is not good enough. So you've got in China, you've got the problems there. You've got in France, you have even in the UK, some members of the public stepped forward and disarmed and sorted out the terrorist on London Bridge, and these kind of things would never have happened before. But people are becoming more defensive and want to re-establish their identity. And what Boris, as I didn't see this speech, but as you're saying, he's pushing now exactly what I said he should push, which is unity, one country. And now he's pushing it. He needs to establish identity. And if he does that, I take my hat off to whoever is advising him, because that is the only way to save this country.
Well, I mean, if you look at the in terms of, the thing is, when you actually look to see actually where, I mean, he's probably worked in some ways. He's been in the company of Donald Trump, as we well know, and one of the things, I mean, there's a huge divide in America between the Democrats and the Republicans, and right now Donald Trump's going through impeachment, although he will never be impeached, in fact, because it's got to go to the...
rather like Bill Clinton.
But it won't.
Actually, impeaching the president would destroy the economy.
But saying that, I mean, the thing is, the Democrats are pushing it through, and in fact, it's more based on hearsay than it is on facts. That's why it'll actually never get through the Senate, although it's been put forward to the House.
Well, the thing is, you see, Bill Clinton was right up to the line of being impeached, and everything had been put in place, all the evidence, and he could have been impeached, but the Senate decided it was not within the interests of the country.
Well, it's also the Senate, I think, was... I don't know whether it was who actually hired the higher percentage of people, whether it was Republicans or Democrats in the Senate, whereas the House, it'll go through to the House because there's more Democrats than there is Republicans, but the Republicans are enormous outrage because the way they've handled this whole impeachment process. And in some ways, you've got to consider that in the Senate, where the final decision is going to be made, is far more Republicans. So it's not going to get through. But the point I was looking to make was that Boris Johnson will have taken a few lessons of how Donald Trump has behaved in terms of getting the economy up, getting unemployment down, and attempting to unite the country. Now, he hasn't united the whole country because obviously there's a very huge socialist agenda going on in America, particularly in the West Coast. But one thing he's done, he's actually united all the people in Middle America, all the blue-collar people in Middle America, to say, it's about the American people, it's about making America great again. So when you actually look at what Boris's team have looked at, or his advisors, there'll be an element of actually it's making Britain as one nation great again.
Well, in fact, that's what Margaret Thatcher used to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you actually think by the amount of seats he won, I think they were probably even surprised by how many they probably even won, actually. I think that it exceeded their expectations. I mean, they got seats that have been held, by Labour for, 30, 40 years and things like this.
About time is the answer, because all I've seen in the last few decades is as soon as a leader goes into power, then they're struggling to do anything at all because of course they don't have quite enough seats and everyone's voting against them. And you think, what is the point of that? Once someone is elected leader, let them lead. Otherwise, all you're doing is sinking in quicksand and not doing anything. And at least in this country, you've got the civil service who actually run the place. And as they've demonstrated in the last 3 years, where the Parliament has nothing but argue, Britain has still functioned, and that's because of the civil service.
So tell me something, because there was two factors to this outcome today. And it was partly Brexit, and it was partly, actually, do you really want Jeremy Corbyn in place? And because Jeremy Corbyn is not a leader, he's not electable. Now he won. He got in with. He did better than expected against Theresa May. He was actually very robotic, and we talked about this. But he also used the student card in terms of the free education, and then backtracked on it. So he couldn't use that card again.
I think they knew.
And he hasn't got a lot to. He hasn't got a lot to offer.
But if you watched it, he was very impressively bad. He was lacking, and I was thinking, he can't be doing this. He's got to be bad on purpose, and I think they knew they weren't going to get in for whatever reason, whether it was anti-Semitism or because when he was constantly pushed to give answers, he just wasn't giving them.
Well, he's never been clear on his answer. I mean, it was it was partly a Remain party, it was partly a Brexit, but there was no, there was the message was too blurred. And even today, when he actually gave a speech about, I will not be the next leader of the next general election. Really, I mean, the thing is, do the right. If he wants to do right by the party, rather than their own ego in some ways, actually resign today. You'll still be in charge until they actually find a new person. But he wants to sit down with his team. He wants to hold on to this position for as long as he has.
So Britain had the choice between someone who was a lifer of a politician with no clear message, or a naive and mature, disagreeable person who's arguing all the time and appeared angry, or Bojo, who was the likeable, affable, appearing to be solid, directing leader.
I mean, is he dishonest? Yeah, I mean, I think he got sacked by the Times.
And tending towards authoritarianism.
As well, didn't he?
And tending towards authoritarianism. And you see, what humans require. You see that one of the key things in terms of being tribal is we are programmed to seek structure. and hierarchy. We function within that because otherwise tribes wouldn't function. You can't have reflex anxiety reducers, which is what all organisms are with any form of self-awareness, living together without any kind of structure. Otherwise there would be mayhem. So we're programmed to do that. We're programmed to seek structure.